everybody. And I do try to spend as much time in Local 100 as I can, actually. But I have a different role now, and life marches on. So I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's very bittersweet for me when I come back here, particularly to an event like this, and I walk around a room and I see folks, brothers and sisters, that we've had struggles together, fights together, screaming matches together, but at the end of the day, we're all TWU, and everybody with the same goal in mind, to beat these bosses that are trying to beat us, and to beat them before they beat us. So I want to say just a couple of things. I don't have a prepared speech, and I rarely do. I used to do that, but I kind of like having a conversation now, even interactive for that matter. I looked at the video, and a couple of things jump off the page at me. So the early days of the TWU is something that the TWU can be immensely proud of, but as well as the Irish and Irish Americans have a tremendous amount to be proud of. And one video clip in there in particular stuck out for me, and that is what I want to call the Pinkertons or the Beakies, or whatever they called them at the time, but we know them as Beakies now. They just don't have nightsticks, at least most of the time. And the bloodying up of the organizers of the early Union, and the fights in the street. And if you're funny, you saw the one clip of me in there, and I said there was blood on the streets of New York City organizing this union, and it's absolutely true. And there were many, many, many efforts to organize New York City transit workers and the transit industry in New York City in the lead up to its final coming around in 1934. And those efforts were all beat back by the bosses and their goon squads and the Pinkertons and the Beakies and the security that they hired. But one thing was different in the lead up to 1934. The Easter Rising took place in 1916. It led to the Irish War of Independence. Unfortunately, that led to a complete and total tragedy of the Irish Civil War. The diaspora of the Irish Civil War, which were essentially the Republicans that wanted to keep on fighting and reject the partition, that partitioned the modern-day Republic from the north of Ireland, or the occupied counties of the north of Ireland. So that diaspora made its way to New York City. And those Irish men and women were hard. They were hardened. They'd done battle with the British Army. They'd done battle with the Black and Tans. They'd done battle with the Unionists. And here they were on the streets of New York City, facing down the Pinkertons. And I think once you face down the British Army and the Black and Tans and the Unionists and the entire apparatus of government, of imperialist government, the Pinkertons were, a little bit of a downgrade for them. They weren't so fearful. And they defeated the Pinkertons and went on to organize this incredibly great union that we have, the Transport Workers Union. But it was that fight that took place, that battle that took place in Ireland that carried over with that diaspora that we are, those of us that are Irish are all descended from, frankly. And that's what put us on the map. That's what got us over the top, and that's what beat the security apparatus that these bosses hired. It's very important. Now, I did an interview earlier today with a Irish interviewer named Fiona, and I don't even know what publication she writes for. But she was talking about what is the legacy of Irish Americans in the trade union movement today. And I told her, without speaking about the broader issues of Irish Americans, the Irish legacy in the trade union movement, I talked specifically about the Irish legacy within the TWU. So fast forward all these years, you heard that in the union in the 30s that the union was about 50% Irish, and particularly the IRT, which was Jim Gannon stole my line, which was that it's called the IRT, the Irish Republican Transit, but it wasn't only called that because it was significantly Irish, because the demographics was significantly Irish. It was called that because they were fighting. That's part of the reason it was called that. They were Irish and they were fighting back. And that early legacy of that Irish diaspora that made its way to New York City to organize the TWU that fight back legacy still exists in transit workers today, right here in this room. And it doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter. Maybe 3% of the union is Irish. Is that accurate? Anybody think 5%? 2%? Small. But yet that legacy of the early fighters and organizers, and certainly they weren't all Irish. They weren't. But that legacy, that fight back legacy exists today. And it has been passed down from generation of transit worker to generation of transit worker. And as the immigration into New York City comes, and so goes the demographics of Local 100 in New York City. When you see waves of Caribbean immigration in the 1980s, the demographics of Local 100 began to become very Caribbean. As the demographics of immigration become Russian or former Soviet republics or South Asian, we see the demographics of Local 100 reflecting that. But so even though the demographics have changed, that Irish legacy, that militant legacy of the diaspora that beat down the Pinkertons still exists. It exists in this room today, no matter what ethnicity we are. And that's one of the true legacies of the Irish founders of this union, is that fight back spirit has never left us. And it's here today. You're going to see it in the next contract. And more importantly, you see it in our depots, you see it on the railroad tracks, you see it in the bonds. If somebody, we are one of the only unions, if not the only union in the public sector, that puts the fear of God into the bosses when they mess with one of our people in a significant way. It's not the instinct of most of us, and it's certainly not the instinct that we've instilled in our officers and shop stewards to revert back to the grievance procedure when we're facing a problem with a boss. The grievance procedure is not our answer to a bad boss. We're playing right into their freaking game if we do that. The answer to a bad boss is to find a way to attack that boss, identify his weakness and attack him and undermine him. And there's nobody better at doing that than us, whether it be a depot chair or the chair of a bond or the lead steward of a track gang on the railroad tracks or the division chair of track. That's something that we all have in common. Nobody's abusing a TW Local 100 member or a TW member as long as I'm around without a massive, vicious, and as I was described as, and which I love, by a boss named Wojciech from Track Division. Anybody remember that name?
Oh, yeah.
So Wojciech wrote a letter to Labor Relations saying that I led a wolf pack mentality on the railroad tracks in the early 2000s, a wolf pack mentality against his bosses. And I loved every second of that, and I still tell as many people as I possibly can, because that wolf pack mentality, retaliating against bosses that target us, is what makes the TW what we are, and it's why workers today still line up to join our union, and still line up, and still don't line up to join many, many other unions. It differentiates us, and we need to keep that fight going and that fighting spirit going. So those early days have continued on to 2018, and I wanted to begin with that. So, also, I mean, just what does it mean to be Irish in New York City? What does it mean to be Irish? New York City is a city of demographic enclaves. It really is. There are Haitian neighborhoods. There are little Chinatowns popping up all over New York, particularly Brooklyn and Queens. There's Russian neighborhoods, Brighton Beach. You drive down Brighton Beach Avenue, most of the signs are still written in Russian. There's Romanian neighborhoods. It is what New York City is, and particularly with being Irish, when you could be a third generation Irish American, and if somebody walks up to you on the streets of southern Brooklyn or neighborhoods in the Bronx and they say, "What are you? Like, what ethnicity are you?" Irish people actually don't say we're American. Everybody in the room would realize that. They don't say we're American. They say we're Irish. That's what we say. We're 3 generations apart, and it's been instilled in us for many reasons. I just want to talk about a couple, but for many reasons, it's been instilled in us to react to say, "I'm Irish." Doesn't mean that we're not proud of being Americans, but this is what we are. We're Irish, and that blood is coursing through our veins even 2, 3, 4 generations later. I think part of the reason for that is that the most of our parents and grandparents that came here under extreme duress. under economic duress, political duress, chased by the police, and a whole bunch of other unsavory reasons why we got on the boats and came here. And that fight that's going on in Ireland, that 800-year-old struggle that's going on in Ireland is in the blood of modern-day Irish Americans. It's just in our blood. And for anybody who hasn't been to Ireland, anybody who has an ounce of Irish blood in them, when you get off that plane in Ireland, it's almost like a chemical reaction. I don't know how else to describe it. Who in the room's been to Ireland? What Irish American that was born on U.S. soil has been to Ireland? You would know what I'm talking about. You get off that plane and it's like there's an electric feeling coursing through your veins, where you know you're home. You've connected to the soil, and you know you're home, and you know this is where your roots are. It's almost a mystical experience, and that bit of a mystical experience is passed down through the generations to the point where we are today, having our Quill Connolly celebration, having a massive St. Patrick's weekend in New York City, which will be full of revelry and a celebration of our Irish culture. And I'm proud of that. You know, I'm proud to belong to that community. And, you know, my name is Samuelsen, which I catch a lot of flack for. Kind of Irish guy are you with a name like Samuelsen? But, in fact, I'm a typically American guy. I'm the American story. My mother is Irish. My father is half Norwegian, half Irish. That's where the name Samuelsen comes from. So while my name may be Norwegian, I'm actually 3/4 Irish, and all my roots, almost all the roots that I keep in touch with are in the north of Ireland, and couldn't be prouder of that. Not that I have a problem with the Norwegians, but, you know, my heart is in Ireland, and it always will be. So, just moving on, you know, continuing to have our conversation. Industrial unionism. Our union was built on industrial unionism. Connolly recognized that industrial unionism was the best way to empower workers, the best way to bring power into a workplace in a particular industry. It differentiates us in a really significant way from, say, the construction trades in New York, which happen to be, you know, a good chunk of Irish Americans in the construction trades. And not only Irish Americans, Irish-born workers as well. Our industrial union has served us well, very well. Every time we've moved to take strike action against New York City and the MTA, whether it be, as Mike Quill outlined, the crafts, whether it be a station agent or a station cleaner, a CTA, or whether it be the skilled workers that maintain our signal system or maintain the other complex advanced technology systems that we maintain. When we take collective action, standing side by side, that's where our worker power is, and that's why we can shut down this whole entire system. That's why we've done it successfully in the past, and that's why when pushed to it, when a gun's put to our head, that's why we'll do it again. And we'll do it again because of this industrial union, standing side by side, skilled worker with unskilled worker, fighting the same fight to take care of our livelihoods, safeguard our children, advance our families. That's where it's at. Industrial trade unionism. Quill believed it. They founded the union along industrial trade union lines. Efforts to organize New York City transit workers prior to Quill focused in many ways on craft unionism. Craft unionism, you know, is for somebody else other than New York City transit workers. Every once in a while it crops up. When I was the vice president of Maintenance Away, there was an effort to say that Maintenance Away should break themselves off from the rest of the union because of the high skill level work that Maintenance Away workers do. And, you know, I came out dead against that. Absolutely dead against that. While it is true that I would be among the lowest skills of anybody in Maintenance Away, I'm just a track worker. It took basically a laborer by trade. It took no skill at all to get that job. But we're in the same department with signal maintainers and electronic maintainers and folks that went to a lot of college or training to get to where they are. But our power is not to separate ourselves. We dissipate our power when we separate ourselves. Our power is to take pride in the fact that we've organized this whole entire industry under one collective bargaining unit. And when we say no, that we're not settling a collective bargaining contract and we're going to engage in strike action, that's why we can shut this whole city down. And that's why when we're forced to do it again, we're going to be able to. So I just wanted to say that about the industrial organizing piece and the importance of it. Now, just moving on a little bit. Modern day Ireland, right? 20 years ago, the Good Friday Agreement was signed. I started going to Ireland long before 20 years ago. Honestly, I started going to Ireland for the first time when I got a real job and I had money in my pocket. I wasn't married. I didn't have any kids. And for me to be able to go to Ireland very early 1990s was just such an incredible experience. And one of the most profound experiences was the British Army occupation of the place where my roots are in Derry. It was astounding to me coming from Brooklyn that to go into to cross the border from Donegal into Derry City, which I did many, many times, and taking the Buncrana Road and across that massive checkpoint with the British Army pointing guns right in your face. Not a pleasant thing, but for me at 21 years old or maybe even younger, to experience that was a extremely, extremely good thing. It was a very good thing. I got to see what the world was like when you didn't have the freedoms that we had and that we take for granted in America. Literally, the British Army was on the streets of the north of Ireland, absolutely controlling life in the north of Ireland. British troop towers were all over the place. Steve Headley over there is from the Bogside, which I just found out yesterday. And you would know very well what I'm talking about. When I was a brash, 20 years old or 21 years old with not a care in the world, I walked into the Bogside Inn. And as you walk into the Bogside Inn, to the left of the Bogside Inn, and thankfully it's gone now, there was a massive British troop tower. Massive British troop tower. And I walked in to the Bogside Inn with a bunch of my cousins from Derry, and I turned around and to the British troop tower. And I just thought I was... What's that? I gave him the Stugats. What do you call that? The Stugats? Ungats? What do you call it? Stugats. Anyway, there's a bit of arrogance about me. Totally lacked humility by doing that. And the cousins I was with, who lived in Craigan in the Derry and Shantallow, were put into a bit of a panic for that. British troop tower was looking down and no doubt taking photographs of everybody. And here's this kind of naive Yankee, just thinking who he was, and to the British troop tower. I've come back, went there several times again before the Good Friday Agreement, but I've been back there a few times in the last few years. The troop tower's gone. The border passing between Donegal and Derry, or the Buncrana and Derry City, is totally eliminated. Whereas when I first started going there, we would have to drive through essentially a wall, a literal, a hard security wall that was armed to the tooth by the British Army. 20 years later, after the Good Friday Agreement, unless you're paying attention, you cannot tell where you drive over from the British occupied north of Ireland, British occupied Derry, into the Republic of Ireland. The border is absolutely and totally, completely gone. And that's remarkable progress in the aftermath of the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. And while there still may be tension in the air over there, and there is, this tension, it's light years ahead of where we were, and there's generally peace in the north. Peace in the north being incredibly important relative to what was in the north prior to the Good Friday Agreements, or the Good Friday Agreement. So I'm bringing this up for a reason. So the Brexit vote, which is a controversial vote, right? I know some of the British trade unions supported it. The European Union is a bit like NAFTA. It's a bit like our NAFTA. That be an accurate description, correlation. It's a bit like our NAFTA. So the Brits pulled out of Brexit, but once the Brits pulled out of Brexit, this whole question remains about the border between the Republic of Ireland and occupied north of Ireland, again, occupied by the Brits. And now the protections that exist between the Republic and the North, and free movement of Irish-born people between the North and the South, both for economic reasons, for cultural reasons, that free movement that's existed for the last 20 years and frankly brought a high level of prosperity to Ireland that didn't exist before 1998. It existed some time ago until the Brits partitioned that wall around 1920 or 1921. Until the Brits put an artificial barrier up and partitioned the country. But there's a potential that the Brits may once again try to put some form of wall up, perhaps not a hard wall, but some sort of wall to once again demark the border crossing between the Republic of Ireland into the occupied north of Ireland. Well, the truth of the matter is that it's one island. This is one island. It's one island. It's one nation. And reasonable folks on both sides of the equation are just seeking one prosperous nation, whether you're a unionist, whether you're a Republican, whether you're a nationalist, and frankly, whether you're a Protestant or a Catholic. Seeking one nation that's full of justice and full of prosperity for everybody so that they can raise their families in peace. And that's where we're at now compared to 25 years ago. The withdrawal from the European Union and Brexit is threatening that on one level. I don't think it's mainstream British politicians that are talking about it, but perhaps some are. The construction of a hard wall to once again separate the Republic from the North. And I got to tell you, if anybody moves to construct that hard wall, we should be over there tearing down that wall brick by brick. That wall can't go back up. That wall is a symbol. That wall is an absolute horrific symbol of British occupation and domination of an island that they shouldn't be in to begin with. They have no right to be there. They never had a right to be there. And they sure as hell don't have a right to occupy it with soldiers. And we're facing a potential problem with this. And again, whether it's a hard wall or an electronic wall, anything that the Brits try to do to affect the prosperity that's been brought to that island in the aftermath of the Good Friday Agreements has to be resisted. And we, as Americans, matter of fact, whether you're an Irish American or an Italian American or any kind of American, African American, we should be putting all of the efforts. Our House of Representatives and our Senate should be bearing down pressure on the British government right now to eliminate any kind of artificial barrier between the counties that are occupied by the Brits in the north and the Republic of Ireland. The prosperity achieved over the last 20 years, we can't go backwards on it. There's no way we can go backwards on it. We've went forward. And again, the last 20 years must have shown everybody, regardless of what political persuasion you find yourself in, the prosperity that's been achieved in the aftermath of the Good Friday Agreements has been absolutely remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. Any effort to go back has to be resisted. And it has to be resisted strongly if there are any efforts, and aggressively if there are any efforts to actually put some sort of hard wall there, and God forbid, a militarized wall. Although I honestly don't think that's in the cards. Now, the reason that we're important, because we are. The McBride Principles for fair employment in Northern Ireland. The McBride Principles are largely in place, and they were incredibly helpful and prevented discrimination in hiring practices in the north of Ireland, hiring practices that discriminated against Catholics in the north of Ireland, Catholics in their own country. And the McBride Principles were effective, and they were pushed to the forefront of the political discourse by the United States trade union movement. That's who pushed us there. And big chunks of those McBride Principles were written right here in New York City by trade unionists and trade union supporters. We have every opportunity right now before us, every opportunity to reinvigorate the Irish trade union movement's involvement in the affairs of the north of Ireland. We have an ability to get with the Congress folks and the senators that can have an influence on Great Britain, have an influence on the Brits to think reasonably and not go backwards and not take away this prosperity that has occurred, this prosperity in the aftermath of the elimination of the border wall. We can't go backwards. We have to go forward. and we play a role here. There's going to be a lot of organizing around this. You're going to hear a lot about this as we go forward. And I'm just going to say one last thing. So many times I say I'm going to say one last thing, and then I don't, but I probably will this time. Since we've been little kids, since I've been a little kid, we've heard 26 plus 6 equals 1. How many folks in a room have heard that? 26 counties of the Republic and the 6 counties under occupation in the North. You combine them together, it equals one nation, as it should be. One unified nation of Ireland. And 26 plus 6 does equal 1. Irish reunification is in the cards. It's part of the Good Friday Agreement. A referendum is written into the Good Friday Agreement. We need to get to the point where we press these elected officials in the United States to press the Brits to conduct a referendum. And then when that referendum is conducted, we need to win that referendum. And in our lifetime, and I turned 50 years old a short while ago. Since I was a kid, a United Ireland was the cause of my uncles. I was shameful that it's a horrible thing that my father would not be around to see it. But a United Ireland can be had in our lifetime. It can be had. It can happen. We need to push the referendum. We need to win the referendum. Imagine if the fruit of our collective labor was a united Ireland with a prosperous nation for all, whether you be a unionist, whether you be a Republican, a nationalist, whether you be a Protestant, whether you be a Catholic. That should be our goal. One nation, one united Ireland for all, with justice for all. This is possible within our lifetime. I would encourage everybody to get into this fight. The fight is coming, and when it does, we will be getting information out there. I just want to say it again. It can happen, and it really can happen a lot faster if the United States labor movement puts our muscle and our political clout behind the fight for United Ireland. That's what we need to do. That's what we're going to do. And it's damn sure what the Transport Workers Union of America is going to do. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.